In 2001, the Green River Killer was finally caught, ending a decades-long investigation into one of the most horrific eras in the Pacific Northwest. Convicted of 49 murders, this man confessed to even more, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in the U.S. It would take over 20 more years to identify the remains of 3 of his young victims. This is their story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we will be joined by Tabitha Brownstone.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, as a warning, this is an incredibly heartbreaking episode.
Am I ready for this?
You never are. But I thought I would tell you before we begin, it does include 2 things that you do actually like.
Okay.
1, dogs.
We love dogs.
We love the dogs.
Are they crime-solving dogs?
They are. They are crime.
We love those even more.
Yes, the best boys and girls.
Best boys and girls.
Right. Also, it includes Karen Binder.
We love Karen Binder.
We love Karen Binder.
Yes. Do you want to tell these guys who Karen is?
So Karen is an investigative genetic genealogist, and she used to work for the DNA Doe Project, and she now works for Ramapo College in their genetic genealogy certificate program. So she's in this, and I'm so excited because she's just like the loveliest human.
She's an amazing person. And she also came to our premiere when we did our documentary, She.
She did.
And she's just a great personality and a really stylish dresser. I always love to see what she's going to be wearing.
Oh my God, such clothing envy.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so we had to see her in person again at St. Lawrence University where we did a visiting week with her. And yeah, so she's amazing. And I'm glad that I can talk about how amazing she is in this episode.
Okay, so heartbreak, but there are dogs and Karen.
Yes, and we're going to start off with a dog.
Okay.
On March 21st, 1984, Bob Van Dyke was cleaning some brush at the Highline baseball fields in the Seattle metro area in what is now known as SeaTac. Bob managed 3 baseball fields, so he was gearing up for the 1984 baseball season, and that's when his Labrador Retriever emerged from the nearby marshy area and ran up to him with something in its mouth.
And I'm going to go ahead and guess that the something belongs to a person.
Yes, and Bob knew that too. So before he could even see it, he just knew. He said, "I knew what it was, but I hoped it wasn't." And what Bob's dog had actually delivered to him was a human pelvis.
Okay.
But good dog.
Very good dog. It's better to find it than to not.
Right. And these fields, they're about 6 blocks away from Bob's house. So he called the Port of Seattle Police, whose jurisdiction he was in, and then they called the Green River Task Force. This task force was a specialized team that was tasked with identifying the killer known only as the Green River Killer, who had been killing young women throughout the Seattle area for the last few years.
Okay, so they have an entire task force dedicated to this killer?
Yes. And we're going to get into that.
How many victims are we talking to have this happening?
Quite a few. So we're going to kind of give a broader picture of what's going on here.
Okay. I had to actually think about that for a minute when you said that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Because that makes it feel much bigger.
Yes. And so when this team arrives, they follow Bob to the area that he'd been, just off Des Moines Memorial Drive. And this marshy area that his dog had been in was just outside the baseball diamond. And that's where, with the help of a search dog, they found the remains of a woman in a copse of pine trees.
So this was a different dog?
There's lots of good dogs.
Oh, there are many in the story?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the next day, investigators return, and with the help of 60 Explorer Scouts, they're walking, shoulder to shoulder, basically. They're covering several blocks searching for more remains. Because there's one thing that the Green River Task Force was prepared for, and that is where one set of remains was found. There would likely be more.
Okay, so we're viewing this as like an area where things were,
Yes.
multiple things were left.
Yes, so they're already onto this possibility.
Okay.
And with them was Chris Clifford. He's a dog handler for a bloodhound named Sorrow. It was Sorrow who located the remains of another young woman close by.
They chose the name because of what the dog does?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, it's a beautiful name, but...
It is. I actually petitioned to, like, rename my dog that.
Oh.
My husband was
like... It
like...
does not match his personality, though.
No.
No. He's the opposite of Sorrow.
He definitely is, yes. Joy contained inside a dog.
Yes. But if you ever get a moody dog...
It's on the list of possibilities. But back to the story. The woman Sorrow found was Cheryl Wims, who had disappeared on her 18th birthday on May 23rd, 1983. Cheryl was set up to meet with a sex worker on the day she disappeared. She'd occasionally done sex work herself, but at 18, her life had just been cut short. Years later, her mom said of her youngest daughter, she was just getting ready to be a woman. The other woman that was found by Bob Van Dyke's Labrador was not identified. Investigators began referring to her as Bones 10 or Jane Doe B10 and logged as another victim of the Green River Killer.
Is that the one we're focusing on today? Or is this going to be like...
It's a multi-part situation.
This is a multi-part situation. Okay.
Okay.
Yikes.
So it might be good to establish a few things first because, Vanessa, what do you know or do you know about the Green River Killer?
I do not know about the Green River Killer.
Okay.
At all.
Zero.
Except for what you just told me.
I mean, I do love this about you.
It makes me feel like I must live under a rock or something. Like, I swear I do, pay attention to things in the news and watch a lot of documentaries, but I guess just not these. And I read a lot, but maybe it's too much fiction?
I mean, we all need fiction.
Right.
In our lives. But, okay. So I'm going to briefly sum up what is happening in the Pacific Northwest at this time and what was happening with him so we can establish a few things. You know what's going on and our listeners do. So on July 18th, 1982, which is 2 years before Cheryl Wims and Jane Doe B10 were found, some young boys were playing down near the Green River when they noticed something in the water.
Poor boys.
From my experience.
Whenever you say somebody noticed something or a dog found something, it's not a good thing.
No. It's always like dogs and young boys. It's like...
Sometimes little girls do too.
Some little girls.
Yeah.
So what they found was the body of a young white woman, and her arms and legs were kind of caught up in something like maybe rope. When police arrived, they secured her body and began investigating. Police were able to ascertain that she'd been strangled to death with her own underwear and placed in the river several days before. This woman remained unidentified until a tattoo artist recognized his work and helped identify her as 16-year-old Wendy Caulfield. Wendy was last seen on July 8th, which was a few days before her body was discovered. She had been staying at a juvenile detention center and was on a 24-hour pass to visit a relative, but never returned to the center. She had been reported missing, but no one connected her to the body found in the Green River. It's all very much sadness.
It is. Not a fun day of work for that tattoo artist either.
Now to be like, oh, her.
Yeah.
When they found Wendy's mother, she was able to tell investigators that her daughter had been struggling since the family moved to a small town outside of Seattle and that she dropped out of school in middle school. She often ran away from home and had been sexually assaulted while hitchhiking. She was in the juvenile detention center for stealing food stamps, and she'd also been working as a sex worker. But Wendy Caulfield's story, it quickly becomes entwined with the story of like so many other women and teenagers in this area. On August 12th, the body of Deborah Lynn Bonner was found. Deborah had been missing since July 25th. She was found by a slaughterhouse worker in the Green River, not far from the slaughterhouse. Deborah, who was 22, had been working as a sex worker, and in the month before she was arrested 2 times for soliciting. She had left the Three Bears Motel on July 25th, informing her friends that she was going out to solicit, and never returned. On August 15th, 3 days after Deborah was found, a rafter spotted the bodies of 2 women in the river.
Okay, so you weren't joking when you were telling me there was going to be a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carry on.
You're going to have to brace yourself.
I'm bracing.
Okay. So responding to the call, Sheriff Dave Reichert almost trips on the body of a third woman whose body was on the riverbank. One of the women who had been in the river was identified as Marcia Chapman, who was 32 when she was murdered. She went by the nickname Tiny and had 3 children. The other woman in the water was Cynthia Hines, who was 17 and known by the nickname Cookie. The woman on the riverbank was Opal Mills. She was 16 and she was working with her friend Cookie painting houses. Opal was the daughter of Kathy and Robert Mills, who had moved to Washington to escape the miscegenation laws that existed in Colorado. And she was named Opal after her paternal aunt, herself a victim of an unsolved murder. And I want to add here, to be clear, Opal's friends and family say that she was not involved in sex work because many of the women I've mentioned so far were.
Well, and these are, I mean, we say women, but they're girls.
Yeah.
These are young girls. And the name Opal is just so beautiful. And I'm having a hard time with the thought of how carefully her name would have been picked. And then this to happen to her. And then the nicknames Tiny and Cookie. Just like, this is a heartbreaking story.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're already at like so many women.
We are at so many young girls, women. Yeah.
So with this series of murders, it is clear then, and investigators realize that they're dealing with a serial killer. It was obvious that he was targeting young women in the greater Seattle area and that many of these teens and women had some connection to sex work. Soon after, they created the Green River Killer Task Force and got to work trying to find their killer. In early 1983, the task force, they're circling one potential suspect and questioned him several times. He was known to pick up sex workers, and his vehicle potentially matched a description from a witness. And investigators were right to consider him. What they didn't know at the time is that he actually was the Green River Killer. They had the right guy. Later on, after he'd been caught, the Green River Killer said that he leaned up against a fence to conceal the scratch marks from one of his victims on his arm when he was being questioned. But at that time, they didn't have solid proof that it was him, so they moved on to other leads.
That's awful. He knew what he was doing. They knew who the guy was. They just couldn't.
Well, he was like a really strong suspect, and they thought this could be it, but there wasn't really enough there. So in 1984, by the time that Cheryl Wims and the woman known as Bones 10 had been found near the baseball field, the bodies of 17 women had been found. And like Cheryl and Jane Doe B10, not all of them are found along the Green River, but in groupings primarily near Seattle and the surrounding areas.
Now, is he kidnapping them in groups and then like dumping the bodies in groups, or is he just going back to the same place over and over again?
Going back to the same place over and over. It seems like Opal and Cookie were kind of the only ones who seemed to like know each other.
Okay. So, and they weren't taken at the same time?
It's unclear to me.
It's unclear. Okay. Yeah.
Despite not having full evidence, not being able to confirm it, investigators weren't entirely ready to remove this male suspect from their list. So in May 1984, so just a few months after Cheryl Wims and Bones 10 had been found, they decided to bring him in for a polygraph. By that point, the bodies of 6 more women were found, and a 7th was found at the end of that month. So they gave this suspect a polygraph test, but he passes. So they let him go.
Gee, so they are trying to do the right thing and trying to stop these murders, and it's just not happening for them.
Exactly. So they keep on bringing this guy in. They're following other investigative leads. It's just not firming up. And, you know, people put a lot of stock in polygraph tests. Mm-hmm. They still do. And he's often used as one of the examples of why polygraphs, like, might not be the best approach investigatively.
Well, not like a polygraph alone. Maybe that can be part of a series of things.
Right.
Well, and they know, and they could have stopped, like...
Yeah, I think they know, but they're not certain.
25 of these.
Over the years, more and more women turn up murdered. At this point, a total of 45 of them had been found. These were all women who had been last seen prior to the spring of 1984. Most of these women were identified quickly. but some, like Bones 10, were not. After 1984, it was largely believed that the killer had, for some reason, stopped killing women. Without many new developments, the task force dwindled in numbers over the years, but they were still working on the case. In 1987, they did bring the man back in for questioning because a witness claimed the man was seen with at least 2 of the victims before they disappeared. At that time, they took a saliva sample from the man, but limitations in DNA testing meant this really couldn't be used for much. Between 1990 and 1998, 4 more women's bodies were found and linked to the Green River Killer. Their disappearances all took place after 1984, indicating that the killer had not gone completely dormant or stopped, as they thought. In 2001, though, a DNA match was made between the man's saliva and the DNA evidence found on the bodies of 4 of the victims. Finally, the identity of the Green River Killer was confirmed, and they arrested him at his place of work. He was a married father who worked as a truck painter. At the time of his arrest, he was 52 years old.
Thank goodness for DNA.
Yeah, because that's like the final proof that this is the guy, right?
I feel like he would have just kept going.
Yeah, so there's some indications that though he had not stopped killing women, that like there had been like these long periods of him not. So between 1998 and 2001, there wasn't.
Okay. Still,
yeah. In exchange for his cooperation in locating the remains of his victims, the King County prosecutor agreed not to seek the death penalty in these cases. Ultimately, several more victims were found, bringing the total that he was charged with to 48. He was later charged in a 49th. Investigators and the public feel like this is just a portion of the women he murdered. He confessed to over 70 murders, and they feel like he could be responsible for even more than that.
How did I not hear about this person?
Just be thankful you haven't, but now you have.
Ugh. I don't know how I'm supposed to take that. No, I have.
No,
You've ruined that for me.
I have, yes.
Yeah, because that's a lot.
Yeah, I just bring you joy.
Well, most of my life I have been living in this like very happy little bubble of like happy work. Enter Amy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I knew about him.
I know, but most of my life before this revolved around like weddings and families and like inspiring stories. And now 70 murders. Thanks, Amy. No, honestly, I would rather be talking about this and sharing these stories and letting everyone be aware of it than to keep living happily in my little rose-colored world.
Your bubble, yeah.
Yeah.
So, despite you not knowing about them, Vanessa, there was a lot of coverage, and there is a lot of coverage about this man out there in the world. He's considered one of the most prolific serial killers in the United States. And I know there are people who are likely wanting to get into the why of this or the psychological aspects of it, but really, we often let this man control his own narrative. At times, he tried to make himself seem out kind of like somehow in the right by indicating that in some way these women deserve to die because they're sex workers.
He actually tried to rationalize that?
Yes, and we let him.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And while I wouldn't say that something people generally think about, I would say that in America, there actually is that prevailing belief that either we should give less care or less care should be given to these women, or that they hold some responsibility for quote unquote risky behaviors. So yeah, we kind of replicate that kind of thought process. And I really want to push back against giving him space and first making clear that sex work is work and no one deserves harm, and plenty of people loved and cared about these women. It's like what you just said about Opal's name being chosen, right?
Right. And even those nicknames. Like, you don't give someone the name Cookie unless you love that person, right? Like, this nickname. So it's just, these women are cared for. These women are loved. Nobody deserves this, no matter what work they do. But we're also dealing with the 80s and how people feel about women in general.
Yeah.
And all of these other beliefs. So when he said that, I bet there were people that were like, oh, thank God he wasn't killing the good girls.
I'm sure, right? And so he's justified it, and we've let him have that space. But at the end of the day, he picked these women because he thought, as he later came to say, that he could kill them without getting caught. So on the one hand, he believed that he could do it because They were involved in sex work and no one cared. And on the other, he would strip them of their clothing, jewelry, and personal effects so it would be harder to identify them and therefore pinpoint him. So honestly, even he knew that there were people who cared about these women and who'd want justice for their murders.
So he was just trying to come up with some sort of excuse to make himself feel better or to make other people feel better about what he's doing. But really, I mean, he knows it's...
Yeah, he himself knew. Yeah. And so I'm going to allow a bit more about him because it helps establish what information he was able to give about the women he murdered. One thing he would do is place the women in what he called clusters. And he would often drive by these locations as his own sick way of reliving what happened. But even so, after he was caught, he confessed that he had a hard time keeping them straight in his head or remembering really many salient details about any of them. So he was often unable to provide much specific information about any of his victims.
Well, I mean, there were 70 of them, so how can he remember details about these women that he knew so briefly? Like, it's just too much.
Yeah, so he remembers very little about, not necessarily who they were, but even details about, like, where he picked them up or where they were found or any of those things. And so what I want to do is to take the rest of this podcast to focus on these women a bit more. When I started writing poems about missing and unidentified women, there were 4 women that were unidentified listed as his victims. And before I could write that poem, one of the women, who had been known as Jane Doe B16, was identified as Sandra Major. Sandra's cousin had been watching a show about the Green River Killer and contacted authorities about the possibility of one of them being her cousin. Sandra was 20 when she was reported missing on Christmas Eve. She had been involved in sex work and was last seen getting into a pickup truck in North Seattle.
Was that his pickup truck?
Yeah. That left 3 women known as Jane Doe B10, Jane Doe B17, and Jane Doe B20.
Why the B?
It stands for bones.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
More information I didn't really need to know.
No. So sometimes you'll see them referred to as Jane Doe B, or sometimes just bones.
Okay.
These 3 women, they were part of my poem that appears at the end of this episode, and we started booking the reading of this poem. One of them had been identified, and by the time that we got done booking for it, like just a few months later, all 3 of them have.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this is relatively recent, like new developments. And I think a lot of people didn't know that there were still unidentified victims or that there are women still missing that investigators suspect the Green River Killer murdered. So I'm going to focus on these last 3 unidentified women in the order they were identified to highlight who they were. In October of 2020, investigators approached Cecile Gaspar at her home in Colorado and said that they thought that the unidentified teenager found by the baseball field in SeaTac, Washington, might be related to her. The previous fall, the King County Sheriff's Office contacted Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, who is one of the founders of the DNA Doe Project, a volunteer-based investigative genetic genealogy nonprofit that works to identify John and Jane Does through genealogy. They wanted to see if the DNA Doe Project could identify Jane Doe B10, who had been unidentified since that day in 1984 when her remains were found by the Labrador Retriever. In spring 2020, a sample of her remains was sent to a California-based laboratory that was able to extract DNA. Now, this wasn't a simple process and took concerted effort to clean up the sample so it was usable. But by September, the results were uploaded to both GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. And that's when Karen Binder, who at the time worked with the DNA Doe Project, went to work with a team of 5 volunteers to help identify her.
Go Karen.
Go Karen. Cecile had uploaded her DNA to GEDmatch in 2019 in the hopes that she could be connected to her missing daughter at some point. Because there was this large shift in policies at GEDmatch at the time requiring users to go into their accounts and opt in for law enforcement use, Cecile wasn't aware of this change. And as a result, she didn't directly appear in the matches that DNA Doe Project was seeing. Still, they were able to figure out what Karen called the smoking gun couple, and newspaper searches led to information that suggested this might be the right match.
What's the smoking gun couple?
The smoking gun couple is the couple where basically unites the maternal and paternal sides of the family that they're working on. So it's like the definitive, like, here's the couple that brings together these two different sides of the DNA matches.
So, like, actual people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, identifying how all of this fits together. So it's like if you took a pool of my relatives, right? Like, you would be able to see, like, a pool of maternal matches and paternal matches, and you'd be kind of trying to figure out, like, who are the people that connected these two different sides of these families.
Okay. So it's just basically like the lineage on both sides.
Yeah. So, like,
But
how are they
then
all
they
related?
come together on this one person.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. That probably took me longer than most people to understand, but I get it now.
Okay. We'll be back in a moment. So in January of 2021, the King County Sheriff's Office made public that Jane Doe B10 was Wendy Stevens. She had been 14.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. She's the youngest of all of them?
She's the youngest victim.
Okay. Carry on with this.
So I want to make clear here that we did mention a Wendy earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's Wendy Caulfield. She was the first victim who was found. And for clarity, this is an entirely different Wendy. This is Wendy Stevens. Cecile had given birth to Wendy when she was just a teenager herself, and soon after Wendy was born, she separated from Wendy's father. Cecile told the New York Times that her daughter was a magical kid who never whined or cried. When Wendy was 11, Cecile remarried and they lived in the Denver area. Wendy made friends easily, and Cecile said people weren't strangers to her. Everybody was a potential friend. I was always afraid for her because she was just that way.
That's incredibly sad. I mean, we all know kids like this, right? Those ones that are just too friendly and trusting.
Yeah.
And I guess normally the ones that we hope are most protected.
Yeah, and so the thing about Wendy is that towards her early teens, she started to withdraw. She was hanging out with a new group of friends and started to skip school. And then she started to run away. And her family thought this was a phase, and her mom would often find herself driving around looking for her or tracking down her friends to ask if they'd seen her. In the summer of 1983, though, Wendy ran away for a whole month. She returned home for a few days and then left again in August. Her mom tried the tactics that had worked before, driving around, asking friends. The best she got from one friend was that they thought that Wendy was in Washington, but they couldn't remember if it was Washington State or Washington, D.C. And so her mom contacted police and they filed a report, but it didn't seem to go very far after that. It's unclear exactly when Wendy encountered the Green River Killer, but it's likely it wasn't too long after she left Colorado. For his part, he says that he recalls picking her up near a KFC on the Pacific Highway South in Tukwila before taking her to the baseball field.
Now, like, going back to what you said about, like, her mom contacting police and filing a report and things not going far. When we talk about these stories, there's so many times when you're, like, in the story or in what happened, they assume that the child was a runaway.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost never support for the parents of runaways. And I'm really not sure, like, even if your child did run away, shouldn't we be supporting you in trying to locate that child for their own well-being?
Yeah, it
like,
defies.
It's so sad. Like, she is not an adult.
No.
So it's not like an adult ran away and now we need to just give them their privacy. This is a child.
Right. With, like, child's reasoning, child's working through things. Yeah.
Right. So I never get it when we're talking about these and people are just, oh, like, yeah, that 14-year-old is a runaway. We need to let them be.
Exactly.
Let's not keep with that attitude.
Yeah. And so this is her story is not unusual, right? So she's run away and she encounters him outside a KFC, and then he takes her to this baseball diamond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says that when he kidnapped her and killed her, he did it during the daytime because he had recently tried to kill another woman, but she had escaped.
So why does the daytime make a difference?
So I think
he could see her if she ran? Wow. Okay.
And over the years, her mom actually had considered the possibility that her daughter had been murdered by the Green River Killer, but pushed that feeling aside. Even after learning the news, she said, "How can anybody wrap their head around their daughter being killed by a serial killer? She wasn't necessarily surprised by her daughter's death. She said that she woke up 5 years after her daughter had disappeared and just knew in her soul that her daughter was no longer alive.
And I think, too, as a mom, you're going to think through every scenario, no matter how crazy it may seem. Because, I mean, one of the most horrible things that could happen to you has happened to you. Like, this is just, I mean, if she had a feeling.
Yeah. And so Wendy's mother received her ashes back in the spring of 2021 and was able to bury her. But to emphasize how we need to stop using the word closure so much, her mom says, when you go to bed each night and you think about the last of her moments, that's not peace.
I agree with her mom.
Yeah.
We use closure in such a way that I think it makes, when we're not the person that the bad thing happens to, it makes us feel better to be like, oh, well, at least you have closure now.
Right.
At least you have that. Like, so we don't have to keep consoling that person. Like, why do we think that way?
Well, yeah. So there's this term called a thought terminating cliche. So particularly when people are going through trauma or hard situations or bereavement, like you just say this phrase, like they're in a better place, or at least they have closure. There's no way to really respond to that, right? Which is why I think we need to stop using the word closure so easily.
Right.
And that brings us to the young woman who was known as Jane Doe B-17. On December 30th, 1985, there was an investigation into a car accident that involved a stolen Lincoln Town car that had gone off the road near Mountain View Cemetery in Auburn, Washington. That's about 25 miles from Seattle. Not far from this unrelated accident, they found the body of a woman. Her remains have been placed alongside a large fallen tree. The woman became known as Jane Doe B-16, who, as a reminder, stayed unidentified in 2012 when she was identified as Sandra Major. But up the hill, about 40 or 50 feet away from this body, they find Jane Doe B-17 at the foot of a rotten stump. They thought she might be between the ages of 14 and 17. Now, this discovery had to be shocking, but they also knew that they'd previously found the skull of Kimmy Kai Pastor 2 years before. And they found her a few hundred yards away, and they knew that the killer often placed his victims in groups. At the time Kimmy Kai's skull had been found, they'd done some searches in the area, but it was difficult terrain. They'd called out search and rescue back then and brought in fire truck ladders to maneuver around the steep hill before deciding it was too dangerous and they needed to call off the search. And so it's likely that the bodies of Sandra Major and Jane Doe B-17 were already in this vicinity at the time of Kimmy Kai's discovery.
And of course, Kimmy Kai is one of the Green River's victims, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Later, the Green River killer's wife would say that the shortcut past this area was one of his favorite drives, and he would also say that he selected this site because of the bank and trees. He felt like he could see the surroundings when he left them at this location. Jane Doe B-17 was one of the lingering unidentified cases. The King County sheriffs had done a new composite of her so they could have updated images to share. For this, they contacted Parabon Nanolabs. One of the things Parabon is able to do is to take DNA information that includes physical traits and create a composite based on this information. Parabon depicted her as a fair-complexioned teenager with straight, blondish hair and blue-green eyes. At the time, forensic anthropologist Dr. Kathleen Taylor said, "Every person needs their name back. It will take the help of a nation to give Bones 17 hers." But many, many miles away in Alaska, Donna Hurley did not recognize this rendering or any previous ones as her missing daughter, Lori Ann Respotnik. Donna had moved to Alaska in the 1980s, and though she knew of the Green River Killer, everything about this felt very far removed from her everyday life. And the updated rendering didn't look exactly like her daughter, Lori Ann. Lori Ann had curly hair and not straight hair like the image showed. But in 2023, when she was unloading groceries from her car, she was approached by two men from the King County Sheriff's Office. They told her that they had possibly identified Lori Ann as Jane Doe B-17, and they needed her to take a DNA test to confirm this. For almost a year, the team at Parabon had been working on identifying Jane Doe B-17. B-17's closest DNA match was deceased and had been adopted, leaving really only more distant matches for the team to work with. Cece Moore, who is a well-known genetic genealogist working at Parabon, worked with over 36 matches to build her family tree back to the 1600s. During this, she encountered several other adoptions, which complicated the process.
So everything is complicated.
Yeah, this was not, I don't get, an easy identification. Cece Moore, she also knew that she was dealing with someone who is likely young enough not to have a significant paper trail, and she eventually narrowed it down to some possibilities, but it was the 1972 obituary of Lori's father that helped them firm this up. The obituary included Donna as his wife and listed 2 children, one of whom was Lori. In December of 2023, King County Sheriff's Office announced that they had confirmed that Jane Doe B-17 was Lori Ann Rozpotnik.
So how did they find that through the obituary?
So this is the first place that they actually saw Lori Ann's name mentioned anywhere. So in building out the family tree, like, she didn't have like a strong paper trail. There wasn't much information. So this was like this obituary where her name is mentioned also means that, oh, there's this teenage girl who exists and that she might be the match.
So it was a DNA match to her dad and then through his papers?
So it was a very long DNA match, like this huge family tree that they had to build out. And so
he was just one of the articles they found along it, and then, oh, he's got this daughter.
Yeah.
That's some, like, major, like, teeny tiny nitty gritty detective work.
Right. So it's like they're basically trying to find, like, who are these people who exist? How do they fit into this tree? How can we use genealogy and records? So they're often, like, filling in the gaps and holes. And so Lori was born in 1967. She's the second child of her parents, Donna and William. Lori idolized her dad, but unfortunately he died of Hodgkin's lymphoma when Lori was 4. The family had lived in Centralia, Washington, and generally she loved the outdoors. She was out there hiking and snowmobiling. She played baseball and ran track. She loved horses and dogs. When she was 7, she trained the family Labrador, all the Labradors,
No.
which was named Ebony's Flippy Miss, and showed her in a dog show.
That's adorable.
Her mother said that she was smart and could get A's without even opening her books, and also described her as a firecracker. But things were also hard for the whole family. Donna's parents lived in Alaska, so she was in Washington State trying to raise 2 kids on her own, and money was tight. And around 7th grade, Lori started noticeably acting out. She started getting in trouble for leaving school and shoplifting. And then she started to run away. She ran away over 10 times around that time in her life. One of the last interactions Donna had with Lori was an argument. Lori's friend had a horse and seemed to offer it to Lori if she paid for the feed and stall rental. But Donna resisted because they didn't really have the funds. And Lori blew up at her mom and basically said that she was tired of Donna's tough love approach. And so Lori took off again. Donna hired a private investigator and contacted some friends in law enforcement, but there wasn't much to go on. Donna said she heard from her last in 1982 or 1983 when Lori called her grandparents' house where the family had gathered for Thanksgiving. She said she was happy and living in Seattle and that she would send some Christmas gifts.
Do we know how old she was when she disappeared? Or when she was killed, I guess.
So she's about 16.
Okay, so she's another really young one.
Yeah. So this is the last time that they heard from her. And when they don't hear from her again, Donna tells reporters that she pictured her daughter out there living her life. She said it was easier to go on with life thinking that she was alive and well and raising a family and, just being herself.
It's like a way of coping, I guess.
Yeah. And if we trust what the Green River Killer says, he claims that he encountered Lori in the spring or summer of 1983. I don't believe he revealed much else about her, but he was convicted of her murder. And Lori was buried in the same cemetery in Washington as her father. Her mother told reporters, "Now I have to put her where she needs to be. I'm going to try and have her buried at her dad's right shoulder because that was her favorite spot." The last identification came in January of this year when police finally identified Jane Doe B-20. In 2003, when the Green River Killer was leading investigators to remains, he brought them to an area near Ket Des Moines Road in the Seattle area. At this location, they found several bones, including some teeth, but no skull or major bones were found. She was labeled Jane Doe B20. Investigators uploaded B20's DNA sample to CODIS, but they were unable to find a match for her. Since DNA evidence had been so successful in identifying the other unidentified victims, this case was turned over to Othram, another investigative genetic genealogy company. The results in this case were a bit unexpected. So the woman who had been known as Jane Doe B20 was identified as Tammy Lyles. Tammy was already listed as a victim because the rest of her remains had been found in Oregon 18 years before.
So she was marked as 2 victims?
Yeah.
And how did they know that that part of her was Tammy when it happened?
Well, let me tell you about them finding her before.
Okay.
On April 22nd, 1985, in Tualatin, Oregon, a retired firefighter was looking for flowers near the Tualatin Country Club in a wooded area when he found some remains. The next day when searchers arrived, they found the second set of remains 20 yards away. One of these victims was identified as Angela Marie Gerdner, who was 16 when she died. She had been a straight-A student attending a private school and commuting from Portland every day. She had developed a drug addiction and ended up running away from home in 1983.
He was out picking flowers?
Yeah.
That's adorable.
You should get like a good boy label for...
He's a good man.
Mm-hmm. The other woman didn't match any of the 12 potential missing women on the Green River Task Force list, and she remained unidentified until a relative called on March 8, 1988, and reported Tammy Lyles as a missing person. They were able to confirm it was her through her dental records. Tammy Lyles had been reported missing in April or May of 1983 when she ran away from her Snohomish County home in Washington. She was 16 years old, and though she had not been arrested for sex work, investigators believe that she was working as one that year. She was last seen in June of 1983. Even though she had been reported missing at that time, she was cleared as an active case in May of 1984. It was misreported that she was in the Tacoma area and getting married. In 1988, they buried what remains there were of Tammy. Everyone involved in the case was aware at this time that not all of her remains had been found in 1985. Ultimately, the Green River Killer was convicted of Tammy's murder, but not convicted of the murder of Angela Gerdner, who was found near Tammy.
Why would that be?
So it's likely that Tammy was killed in Washington state. Tammy and Angela were found not far from where 2 other women, Shirley Sherrill and Denise Bush, were found, because this is one of his cluster areas. Now, with Tammy, Shirley, and Denise, these are all women who originated in Washington state, and the Green River Killer claims he murdered them in Washington and simply transported their bodies to Oregon.
Did he say why he did that? That's weird.
That is very weird. And for Angela, though, she was in Oregon. And so if he confesses to her murder, it would likely open him up to a conviction from a different jurisdiction, and he wouldn't have the death penalty immunity there was in Washington state that was offered to him there.
He should have thought that out first.
You want the serial killer to do better planning?
Do better planning. Well, I mean, this guy's got excuses. He's got all kinds of crazy schemes.
Yeah.
He should plan better. Think it through, people.
And so Tammy's identification closes this chapter, at least for the unidentified victims. There are several other missing women strongly linked to the Green River Killer, either by confession or by strong evidence, including Casey Ann Lee, Callie K. McGinnis, and Patricia Osborne. Investigators are also looking for the whereabouts of 3 other women who were last seen in the Seattle area, including a friend of Tammy's known only as Angie, a woman who may have gone by the name Michelle, and a woman who went by the names Linda Jackson and Walinda Wells. So this man, who Vanessa didn't know about until just now, he did irreparable harm to the women of the Pacific Northwest. And I know that in some way it's strange for me not to say his name, but I really want us to sit with the women that I named in this episode, along with all of his other many, many victims. This episode is for them.
We're now going to listen to Amy's poem, These Dark Centuries, read by Tabitha Brownstone. As an actress, Tabitha's credits include Kajillionaire, Domino, The Middle, and The Real O'Neill, to name a few. As a creative, Tabitha wrote and produced her own live comedy show, having sold out 5 consecutive shows during the Fringe Festival, later touring abroad in Europe and at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. She has also co-created and starred in Fickle, a series that was acquired by 2 streaming services. You can also find her on the podcast Overthinking It with Liz and Tabitha.
These Dark Centuries. Unidentified woman discovered March 21st, 1984 in Seattle, Washington. The city night burns out, under electricity, while the man holds a blurry photograph. He says, "This is my son. This is the boy I lost." They don't give you anything out here, but it could be true. Down the street is a singed outfield, a hard diamond etched in the ground. "I would take my boy there to play," he says, "if only I had the chance." Unidentified woman discovered August 21st, 2003 in Kent, Washington. From here, the Green River reeks of mud and rot. The truck salt-slicked and sexed. The door opens. I shift pieces of myself back before clattering to the concrete. There are 2 of us in this dark dance. "Goodbye," he whispers against my hair as he cinches an arm around my throat. It is connective, this drawing of breath and night. Unidentified woman discovered February 18th, 1984 in Federal Way, Washington, and January 2nd, 1986 in Auburn, Washington. The city night ends, becomes gray. Overhead, the shrill seagulls, the hot trail of airplanes. Beyond the rising traffic, the reckoning of names on granite markers. This is the edge of land, the hard note of dawn tugging at this horizon, where an ecstasy of form is defined as body.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcasts.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.